When people discuss foreign aid, they generally assume that all money that is donated goes directly to assist the people who need it. However, that is rarely true. The two most common forms of foreign aid often only serve to line the pockets of politicians or the wealthy elite who run these organizations. My topic today is the question of whether foreign aid helps donor countries more than the recipients. I am qualified to discuss this subject based on the research that I have done on this topic. There are three main points that I will discuss in the body of my speech. My first main point will be to discuss the problems associated with foreign aid. My second main point will discuss the causes of those problems. And finally, my third main point will offer solutions to the problem of foreign aid helping donor countries more than their recipients. My first main point discusses the problems associated with foreign aid. In 2008, a correspondent for Africa, Thilo Tilk, is quoted saying, "Development aid is a planned economy, even if it doesn't have a plan." There are two types of foreign aid, that which comes from a foreign government and non-government organizations. Both of these can pose issues, as the foreign aid often ends up going directly to politicians or to the leaders of these organizations, which face little accountability as to how this money is spent. In countries like Haiti, for example, which has more non-governmental organizations than any other country in the world, there has been little to no tangible progress in the several decades that these organizations have been there. Organizations from the US, for example, will often employ other Americans and pay them a higher salary, which then does not improve the job economy or stimulate the economy in those local countries. In 2013, a study by the Pennsylvania State University, it was noted that one of the issues with government-provided aid is that it goes directly to the politicians, who then see fit how to distribute the money. In countries like Rwanda, most of the money provided to the government was funneled into the minority ethnic group, the Tutsi. Even though this ethnic group makes up only around 10% of the entire population, the majority of educational, political, and employment opportunities goes to this ethnic group. This wealth gap further creates a civil divide within this country and encourages violent conflicts and even genocide. A 2016 study from the Princeton University looked at a sample of 150 countries from 1972 to 2008 and concluded that overall, foreign aid causes governments to be less accountable to their citizens, and it may negatively impact human and political rights among its citizens. The reason for this is because since the majority of their economic growth does not come from taxpayers, the government figures have little to no incentive to provide for these people and to keep them happy. Now let's discuss some of the reasons why these problems exist. My second point for the body of this speech will discuss the cause of foreign aid being detrimental to developing nations. Non-government organizations, or NGOs, have been a growing industry for several years. Due to the lack of global political power, NGOs often set up shop in countries where they want to further their political or religious interests. These organizations did not always have a bad reputation, however. In Felix Dodd's book discussing the Earth Summit in 2002, he states how several NGOs worked together in Rio de Janeiro to push forward legislation that would help protect the environment. However, proselytizing disguised as humanitarian aid is increasing in many religious organizations, mainly those of the Christian faith. A 2016 Journal from International Studies Quarterly states that the greatest issue of these organizations is the ethics surrounding proselytizing, which can damage cultural traditions and identity. However, overall, they do tend to do good works within the community. As for government-provided aid, a 2010 study for the Journal of Developmental Economics discusses the parallels between countries that provide foreign aid in order to promote democracy and higher levels of income for both of those countries' elites. The mutual financial benefit for those already in positions of power makes it lucrative to encourage political involvement in these developing countries. My third main point contains solutions to the problems of corruption within foreign aid. Organizations operating in developing countries to provide aid should be made to provide a timeline with a planned date to pull out from said country. Additionally, instead of mostly employing people from the original country, organizations should employ local nationals to help stimulate the local economy. Organizations should also not provide any aid that is not sustainable once the organization needs to leave. Things such as food supplies that require importation or any practices that can create an economic dependency on an already developed country. Organizations ran by religious institutions also need to face restrictions on how they can proselytize. Instead of providing aid in exchange for attending services, for example, aid should be provided regardless of interest in conversion. Finally, organizations need to provide financial statements showing that they are using funds appropriately to benefit the communities that they are serving, instead of turning a profit and creating an economic dependency. In conclusion, today I discussed the question of if foreign aid helps donor countries more than the recipients, which we have found that it does. There are three main points that I focused on in the body of my speech. First, I discussed the problems surrounding foreign aid. Then I explained some of the causes of these problems. And finally, I provided my solutions to making foreign aid more effective and ethical. Providing aid to those who need it is a moral ideology that is deeply rooted in our society. I believe that it is important to still have these political practices along with organizations that are willing to put in the work in these countries. However, we need to ensure that we are not doing more harm than good and that our presence is beneficial to the countries that we aim to assist.